Uh, well, obviously, I love coming anywhere where people are very passionate about what I do. I mean, that's great. I've not spent a lot of time in the city. Only the times I've been here to play. I've really liked the city. We have, as you say, we always have a great passionate crowd here. I don't know. You tell me. Why do they connect so much with my music? I'm not quite sure I know the answer to that. I don't know the answer to that. Anywhere I go where people have more of an affinity with the music, I'm not quite sure why. I think it might be something as simple as there are some countries where the kind of music I play is more accepted by mainstream media than others. It's always a problem in England, for example, where if you play music like the kind of music I play, you never get any mainstream interest. You will never see me invited to play Glastonbury, for example, because the music I play is not considered hip or trendy, whatever. And it's the same in the United States, but in South America and in Canada, it seems to be much more acceptable, and they see no stigma in playing more conceptual rock music. There may be historical reasons for that. I don't know why. Yeah, but it's fantastic that there are places where the music seems to be very, people are very open-minded and accept the music for what it is.
To the point that they invite you to a jazz fest.
Yeah,
I was really surprised.
Me too.
When I saw like Stephen Wilson, I thought, woo.
Me too.
That's really
obviously
nice.
there's a slight jazz sensibility in some of the music, and I have even a bona fide jazz musician in the band. I haven't played with Miles Davis and that, but obviously the music is not jazz. But then I see a lot of artists play at jazz festivals now that are not necessarily jazz. Even in this festival, there's who did I see? Huey Lewis and the News, and
I'm going to see Mika.
Mika,
next
yeah,
Saturday,
and Beirut were playing on the first night, and there was someone else that kind of surprised me as well that was playing here. So I think jazz probably is not really a good indication now of the kind of breadth of artists that plays at these festivals. I think Porcupine Tree had a reputation for being a progressive metal band, and that's something that I think my solo work has kind of gone away from that direction a lot. So the music has opened up and become perhaps more emotional, and I think women also respond much more to lyrics, and my lyrics have been more personal and more direct, perhaps particularly on the last couple of records. And I noticed that one thing, for example, when I do interviews with male journalists, they tend to ask me questions like, what equipment did you use? And then when I do interviews with female journalists, they always ask about the lyrics. And I think that's something that has perhaps appealed more to the female audience the last couple of records, is the lyrics are very, very emotional, very personal, and for some obviously quite moving, and some men don't like that actually. I've had some men say it's too sensitive and not macho enough. PT, I guess. Although I've always felt my lyrics were quite personal, but I guess they were a bit more veiled. They weren't quite as directly personal. And the music was more aggressive and more metal orientated. So maybe that's an explanation. Yeah. Not really. I find that really strange. Maybe, like I say, maybe the last 3 or 4 Tree albums. Yeah, maybe, because there were some big crunchy riffs on those. But my solo work or Blackfield, no man. I mean, I don't understand. I think that there's always been a strong following for my work from within the metal community. Partly, I think, because metal fans tend to be quite open-minded. They at least appreciate musicianship. It's not true maybe of people that are into hip-hop. They don't necessarily dig great musicianship. But I think people who get into metal when they're young, they come at least to understand and appreciate people that can actually play, So when they maybe discover my music, then it makes sense to them. Okay, it's not metal, but there's proper musicians playing their instruments and playing them to a standard. I think that appeals certainly to the more open-minded metal fan. And also I think the subject matter of my work has always tended to dwell on the darker, melancholic side of things. And I think that's also something that's in common with a lot of metal music. I think it's fair to say that most people, and by the way I include myself in this, most people that get into metal when they're very young, and metal was one of the first musics I was very, very passionate about when I was 13, 14 years old. Listened to Iron Maidens and Diamond Head and stuff like that. Metal is a great gateway for broadening out your tastes and appreciating a lot of other kinds of music. And I think ultimately any kids that are into metal when they're young, and I don't wish this to sound patronising to metal, but you know what I say when people grow out of metal and they start to appreciate other kinds of... They still love metal too, but they get into bands like Pink Floyd and King Crimson and Radiohead and then Porcupine Tree and Stephen Wilson. Perhaps for the reasons I mentioned, that I think it kind of engenders, listening to metal engenders an appreciation of musicianship and structure, and those darker themes that we all kind of like. No, I love it. Listen, I think, you know, like we talk about the technology as if somehow the technology is at fault. Mm-hmm. Of course, it's nothing to do with the technology, it's how we choose to use it. And social networking is wonderful for me from a point of view of reaching out to my audience and sharing information, sharing news, gigs, records, releases. To have got that kind of information out to, I mean, I have 250,000 people on my fan page, which is it's quite a small amount considering, you know, compared to some other artists, because my demographic tends to be a little older. You look at some of these metal bands where their audience is primarily young kids, they have millions of followers, you know, and you think how difficult it would have been able to get information out to that number of people before the age of the internet. I mean, trying to print up that many newsletters and put them into that many envelopes, and it would have cost a fortune. So the idea now that you can tell, you know, 250,000 people in my case, like that, you can tell them that you've got a new record coming out or you've got a gig. It's amazing. It's amazing, and it's revolutionised the industry in a way, and it's liberated people like myself from having to rely too much on the mainstream. I don't have to worry too much if I don't get a massive amount of press coverage, or I don't get a massive amount of coverage on MTV. Not that MTV cover anyone these days, but you know what I mean. Yeah. Because I know that I can reach my fan base directly, and that is wonderful. The downside of that, and there's always a positive and there's always a negative. The negative side of that is the temptation for musicians to believe that everything they think and everything they do is somehow worthy of sharing with their fans, and it really isn't. I don't care what Kanye West thinks about, you know, anything. Well, actually anything, but you know what I'm saying. I don't care what the pop musicians I like think about politics, or I don't really care. And by the way, I'd be quite understand if one of my fans wouldn't understand what my views are on something. Now, just last week, for the very first time, I posted something about animal welfare that I felt very strongly about. It's the first time I've ever done it, and even then I was like, should I really do this? Because I'm a pop musician. Should my fans really care about what I think about other issues? So there's always that slight question about you have a following. Should you use the fact that you have a following to share stuff that has nothing to do with music? Do my fans really need to know what I had for breakfast? And there's some artists that post that shit, you know. And I think in some ways that is also, if you saw the press conference, you saw me talk about this yesterday in the press conference, there's also a demystification going on, that we almost know too much about celebrities now and pop stars now. I don't consider myself a celebrity, but people who follow my music, it would be very easy for me to share everything with them about my private life. It almost has a detrimental effect on the enigma and the mystery and the magic that is that kind of pact that you have between you and your audience. And I
That's really
understand
interesting.
this is a different perspective, I know, and I understand that. Maybe it's something that's right for some people and it's wrong for others. Like, for example, I would look at the bands that I guess most people would most strongly associate with me being in the tradition of are, say, Pink Floyd and Radiohead. Neither of those bands give you any access to fans, and I think that's not coincidental. There's something about those two bands, the sense of mystery, the sense of enigma, that is absolutely part of what makes them special. You can't buy a VIP ticket to meet Tom York or David Gilmour. You never will be able to. They're not, and it's even hard sometimes to even find pictures of them. You know, they almost like hide behind the conceptual artwork and all that stuff. And the only way you can see them sometimes is just to go and see them live. And I think that's part of that, as I say, that kind of bond that the musicians have with their artwork is that with their artwork, with their fan base, is that they don't have a lot of access to them, and I think that's part of the appeal, part of the magic, part of the mystery. And maybe it is something to do with the kind of music. Maybe if I was in a death metal band or a black metal band, it would make more sense to give access to the fans. I don't know. I think that one of the reasons why rock music has become such a marginalised musical form, and it has, there's no question, rock music is kind of on the way to following jazz into like being something that only passionate obscurists listen to, you know. And I think one of the problems with that is that it has been demystified too much. And this is why hip hop music still is so popular, because the hip hop guys are still quite happy to stand up and act like rock stars, you know. You might think they're dicks, you know, but they still understand something about the bling, and I'm a rock star and I'm different to you and I'm a pop star. And no matter how much you think that's arrogance and ego and narcissism, and of course it is, it's also part of what rock stars are supposed to be, you know. And I think people like Kanye West understand that you have to almost act like a rock star.
In the case of Kanye West, I think it goes much further than this.
Yeah, I think it does too.
Yeah,
But I do think he understands something about behaving like a rock star, as a lot of the hip hop artists do. And I think rock musicians, on the other hand, have almost dismantled their own mythology. And, you know, starting with Ozzy Osbourne being on a reality TV show, there has been a trend for rock musicians almost to demystify themselves, dismantle their own legend. And what do we end up with? Nobody's listening to rock music anymore. Well, that's not true. But it's become almost an underground cult form of music. And I wonder if that's not coincidental. There is a... Listen, I mean, I can't say categorically any of this is absolutely the case, but I have my suspicions that this hasn't helped. And for me, it's important to keep that sense of mystery. No, not at all. In fact, this is right, a continuation of what we were talking about in the last question. I don't think musicians should ever really preach to their audience.
Yeah, exactly.
The way I like to think of it is musicians are there in a way just to reflect, just to hold up a mirror in a way and say, this is what I see in the world. And that's all I'm doing, really. I'm observing because I'm worried about something, or I'm concerned about the way civilization is going or the human race is going. I do it for myself, you know, and I think all artists ultimately should be just doing it for themselves, which may seem like a very self-indulgent, you know, thing to say, but I think it's almost a responsibility of artists to be kind of self-indulgent in a way. Never to be trying to please their audience. God forbid, you know, you should try to please your audience. So I think you do things in a very selfish way. I mean, I write lyrics about things that concern me. It's my own personal way of dealing with the things that upset me, or like almost like a cathartic kind of process, writing about things that upset me or make me angry or confuse me or make me sad. And then you release these things into the world, and it's just kind of like, well, you know, this is what I see. Do you recognise yourself in the mirror? Does anything here concern you or resonate with you? I stopped short at sort of saying, this is what you should believe, this is why I said to you about posting that thing about the animal welfare thing. That was almost like stepping over the line for me. Because I never want to say to my fans, you should believe this, you should vote for this, you should not eat meat, you know. Even though I might think that, personally for me, it's a lifestyle choice. So I think the answer to your question is no. I don't think that's the responsibility of the musician. I think it's more a question of being an observer and holding up a mirror and letting people make up their own minds. No, I'm not. I'm not actually against it. If I was going to do, if I was going to sort of do it about anything, it would be animal rights, because it really does upset me.
Okay.
And I think there's a lot of ignorance about. But here's the thing: a lot of musicians, you know, I guess the thing that upsets me most is when musicians start campaigning on behalf of politicians.
Okay.
And there's been some of that, you know. Musicians are idiots, just like the rest of us. You know, they don't know anything more than anyone else. They just happen to be in a position where they have the ear of their fans. But God forbid that the fans suddenly believe that these musicians, that they listen to their music, know anything more than they do. We don't. We're idiots too, you know, we're ignorant too. I mean, I have my own lifestyle choice and I have my own beliefs, and I don't believe it's right to kill animals for food. And I can, if somebody asks me about that, I will say that. But actually, there are people that know a lot more about it and can make a much more convincing argument for it than me, which is why when I posted something, I was really just posting a link to somebody else who knows much more about it than I do. I don't know anything, you know, I don't really know much about it. I just have this kind of instinct in me that says it's wrong. Maybe these guys you're talking about have spent time, researched it, and feel like they can offer information to their fans that they believe the fans may not know already. I don't have a problem with somebody doing it if they take it really seriously and it's fundamental to, I guess, the music they make. I mean, there have been hip-hop artists in the past that their whole ideology was based around, you know, vegetarianism or you know, sexual politics. And there was a band called Consolidate, I think they were Canadian even, in the 90s. Everything about their shows was based on sexual politics and the politics of the meat industry. And they even opened up the show and had people come out on stage and argue with them and all that stuff. That's not me. That's not me, you know. Yeah. I feel very out of my depth when I have to start talking about anything in... I mean, I can talk to you about something, you know, but you know just as much about it as I do. You know, I'm not saying I know any more about it than you do. And so I think it's a mistake for me to suddenly sort of raise myself and say, okay, now I'm going to tell you what you should think and preach to you. But that may not be the case with those other bands. Maybe they have, you know, taken the time to... Never.
Never. Why?
Never. It's like looking at a photograph of yourself 10 years ago and all you can see is the bad haircut and the bad clothes. And I think that's quite normal for most musicians. That doesn't mean I'm not proud of the records I've made, but I don't need to hear them ever again. It's almost like once a record is finished, you kind of let it out into the world and it's no longer yours anymore. And actually it's quite painful for me to hear old records now, because I just hear all the stuff that I would do differently and I can't hear the good stuff. But maybe it's a question of time. Maybe there's like a point in time where something becomes distant enough that you can actually listen to it and enjoy it. Yeah, but that's different. But that's different because you're almost like recreating it every night. There are songs I play on stage that I'm very proud of. You know, I'm playing a couple of songs tonight from, or last night, I might not play them tonight, but last night I played a song from Deadwing and a song from Fear of a Blank Planet. And they're two of my favourite songs I've ever written. But if I heard the original studio versions, I'd probably just hear all the mistakes in the production and... you know, that thing that
thing you would change.
Yeah, you know, I wish I'd put a bit more treble on the hi-hat. You know, you can't. It's almost like you can't see the wood for the trees, and you can't step back and say it's just a great song. Or So, but recreating it live every night, it's just the composition, and there are definitely compositions I'm very proud of. I think it's more to do with the production and the technical side of things, the sound of my voice at the time. You know, I had a cold that week. I can hear I had a cold, but that's the problem with when you make a recording. You kind of cast something in stone forever, and I understand that a lot of these artists I work with on remixing their albums have a very similar perspective on their own work. It's not the way it's not the way I think. I don't have any problem with people that do that. I think Kanye West's last album just came out in a blank, you know, didn't it? And there's something appealing about that kind of minimalist approach. Like, here's the music. Why do you need anything else? Yeah. I appreciate that, but it's not the way I think. Okay. And again, I'm not saying this is better or worse. It's just the way I am. Whenever I'm writing music, I'm already thinking. I already have this kind of cinematic version of it in my head, and so for me, so for me, it's the combination. I mean, listen, I'm kind of I'm telling stories through the music, and it's a very conceptual kind of approach to making music. So, to me, just to throw some songs on a blank disc would seem somehow incomplete. Okay. But that's just me, you know. So I can't imagine. I wouldn't imagine doing. If I did it, it would be a conceptual act in itself. Okay. Do you know what I mean? Yes. Which is kind of how it was with Kanye West. It was like a statement, wasn't it? So I can understand that kind of statement, but it wouldn't come naturally to me to do that. No. Well, the thing is that this was a story about a young woman that was completely isolated from the rest of human race. So how do you tell that woman's story? How do you tell a story of someone that has no communication with anyone else? And the obvious answer is diary. And then you think, well, the modern equivalent of a diary in the internet age is a blog. So that was something that occurred to me very early on. The way we're going to tell the story of this woman is through her inner thoughts that she reflects in her diary and through her blog. But of course the other thing is that you can no more trust what she's saying is true than if she was telling it to your face, because she might be lying to herself, or she might be dreaming but believing her dreams are reality. So there's still a lot of ambiguity about what's really happening and what's in her imagination, and I like that, you know. So you kind of make up your own mind what's fact and what's fiction. But that was really the reason for that, is because there was no other way to really tell her story, because she was an island. She was completely isolated from everyone else. They are great pictures. Most of the pictures were taken by Lasse Hoyle, who's been my visual collaborator since the days of In Absentia. And it was a project that was, let's just say it was a project that was very carefully thought about and planned a long time in advance. And I sat down with Lasse and Carl Glover, the designer, and we mapped out basically this young woman's life. And then we had to go and source all of the elements. So there wasn't just photographs, there was also a question of finding official documents like birth certificates, school reports, letters, postcards, family photos, newspaper cuttings. And that was all stuff that Carl, the designer, managed to source. And Lasse's job was to go away and create this kind of photo essay, if you like, which he did brilliantly. And he cast a Polish model, and went over to Poland and shot for a couple of weeks just with her. So it was all very carefully planned and thought about. The definition of a great album, quite simply, is an album that you can listen to from beginning to end, and it kind of engages you. And I have to say that those things become rarer and rarer for me. Because I think too often now, albums are 2 or 3 really strong tracks, and then a lot of stuff that isn't so strong. And I can understand in a way why artists don't try so hard to make cohesive albums, because at the end of the day, we live now in a world where most people stream music from the internet and they make their own playlists anyway, so why bother to tell a story across an album? But I think there is a swing back in the other direction. I think there are, particularly younger people now, are looking for an alternative to playlist culture, or stream, and they want vinyl and they want albums that are telling stories again. At least that's the way it seems to me. I mean, not on a grand scale, but certainly a small and growing movement. What is a great album to me is something that makes you feel like you've been on some kind of journey and you've learned something maybe about yourself or about the world you live in, or maybe not, maybe just something you've enjoyed from beginning to end, but it's engaged you for that whole period of time. And it's not, also for me, a great album is something that's not monotonous, and I mean monotonous in the true sense of the word. In other words, it just has one tone or one kind of emotion. And this is the problem I have with most heavy metal, is that it tends to be quite uniform in terms of its emotional range. And it's why I love metal in very short bursts, but it's hard for me to listen to a whole metal album because
you're wearing a Sono shirt.
And I love Sono, I love Sono, but Sono to me is more like drone.
It's a drone, yeah. It's
drone. And it's drone music I like because it's more like you just fill a room with it's like filling a room with a perfume, you know what I mean?
Yeah, okay.
But when you have, like, metal tends to be more angry and more, more kind of confrontational, and it's hard for me to listen to that one emotion for 40, 50, 60 minutes without there being any light and shade. So I suppose for me an album is something that has variation and it has range and it takes me through more than one emotional state.
Okay.
Well, you don't have to play drums, you can program drums. I mean, I can't play drums, but I program the patterns, I do play bass, I do play keyboards and I play guitar, and I can pick up other things and get a good sound out of it. I play a bit of banjo on the new. I can't play the banjo, but I managed to play a few things that I like the sound of. To me, most of the demos I make are programmed drums, me on bass guitar and keyboards, and then singing, and so I can do those things. None of them particularly amazingly well, but enough for me to be able to make very sophisticated demos that I can then play to my musicians, and they understand what they need to do, and then they'll elevate it to a higher level. Well, these days, I think most people, when they write music, they are basically talking about they are creating something on a computer. Because on a computer you can load a piece of software that will give you a session that you have access to virtual keyboards and pianos and programming drums, play a bit of guitar, record it into the computer, edit it, move it around. And most of the musicians I know, that's how they now write. So it's almost like an oral sketchbook. You don't literally, I can't write or read music anyway, I've never learned, so... but even the computer can do that for you. If you can play, like I write string parts sometimes, and I write the string parts by playing all the different lines, the violin line, and then the computer can produce music, which I can give to a proper orchestral arranger, and he can read the notes. I can't do that, but the computer does it for me. I've got a short list of other songs that I'd like this band to learn, and we're going to learn them later this year, also from the Porcupine Tree years. Ultimately I don't see a distinction between to me they're just songs. Yes. They're my songs, and I don't necessarily see, early on, because I think I needed to, the first couple of tours I did with my solo band, I think I needed to kind of make a statement and say, this is about my solo work now. But now, 4 albums in, I think it's pretty clear to everyone that this is what I do now. So I feel like more comfortable about reclaiming some of those songs that were released under the name Porcupine Tree. We did a couple of songs last night. I haven't just figured out what the set list is going to be tonight, but I feel like those are very compatible with what I do now. To me, I guess there wasn't a distinction for me that there was for some of the fans between writing albums for the guys in Porcupine Tree to play and then writing albums for some other guys to play.
Yeah.
They're different musicians, but to me they're still my songs. I carry on, you know. So absolutely, yes. I mean, I am still proud of a lot of those songs, not all of them, but I'm still proud of a lot of those songs, and I would like to continue playing them. Yeah, they can come to my show and they know they're going to get a load of Stephen Wilson songs.
Yeah. And
some of those might have been written and recorded by Porcupine Tree, and some. I'm not quite sure what this Porcupine Tree fan is. You know, I mean, I guess there are some people out there that have decided they don't want to listen to my solo stuff and that they only like... But I don't think that's many people. I mean, my solo records are selling better than Porcupine Tree records ever sold.
Yeah.
So the audience must have... Firstly, the audience must have expanded, but I also figured that I must have brought most of those people anyway. They used to listen to Porcupine Tree. Most of those people must also have continued on with me. Although I dare say there's a few that have objected just to the whole idea that I would stop doing Porcupine Tree. So if there are a few people that still, you know, are only interested in those Porcupine Tree songs, then sure, they will make a reappearance in the shows over the coming years.
Cool.
I'm very proud of what we do at Blackfield. The problem for me was time, and I had to basically, you know, one of the questions I get asked a lot, or used to get asked a lot, was how do you have time for all these things? Porcupine Tree, No Man, Blackfield, Bass Commune, IEM, Storm Corrosion, and the answer is I don't, and I didn't, and I had to basically say, I had to make priorities, and I decided at that point to kind of draw a line under everything except concentrating on my solo work. And Blackfield has always been really Aviv's baby anyway. I mean, the idea with Blackfield was he would write most of the material and we would record it and produce it together. And that continues to be the case. And he's writing new music now, and he's got Alan Parsons producing the next Blackfield record. And I'll definitely be involved. In fact, I've already done one track with them. But definitely for me, it would be more of a contributor rather than a full member, yeah. The problem with production is it's such a big commitment in time. To say I'm going to give 2 or 3 months of my professional life to somebody else's record, I really don't have the time for that. But I have worked with Opeth mixing. I mixed the last couple of records, which is great because I can still be creative and I can still get. But basically, it's not production. Production is more you get involved with the band right at the beginning. You arrange the record, you get involved in the recording and the tracking. I haven't got time for that. But I've mixed the last couple of Opeth records, and as long as Michael continues to want me to do that, it's always a pleasure to work with him and mix Opeth records. I don't have time to produce other bands, really. I've got
you still get requests?
Yeah, every week. I get. I mean, it's great. You know, every week I get. You know, we're a metal band from wherever, and it's great.
Any famous names in there?
Well, you might know them, but some of them I hadn't heard of. I think so too, but I think it takes a particular kind of artist to be open to that. Yeah. And I'm not sure everyone will be so open to me coming in and like giving them a new sound, you know, which is kind of what we did with Opeth. But that's exactly what Michael wanted. He was like, I don't want to be just another metal band. I want depth to the production, and that works really well. I'm not sure it would work great with some other bands, but anyway, I definitely would love to do another Storm Corrosion record with Michael, and I think he would too if we can find a way to move forward with that. But production, probably no.